I answered a mail-order bride ad just to survive. I thought I was walking into a simple business deal with a lonely rancher. But when I saw the fear in his eyes the first time I mentioned my past, I knew this was more than a marriage of convenience. And when the men with guns showed up at our fence line, I realized the life I'd run from had followed me here. This is what he did to protect me. This is what we built from the ashes. If your heart needs a story about second chances, fierce protection, and a love that's earned, not ordered, then you need to watch this one to the end. Subscribe right now, you won't want to miss a single chapter. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Are you in Texas? Ohio? California? And let me know in your first comment. Would you have had the courage to stay? The Arizona sun was a hammer on the back of his neck as he waited on the dusty porch. The stagecoach was late. He wasn't even sure this was a good idea. A wife from a newspaper advertisement. He needed help on the ranch, plain and simple. He was tired of the silence. The coach finally creaked to a stop, dust clouds swallowing it. The door opened. A woman stepped down, not from the east like her letters said, but looking like she'd walked from another century. Her clothes were simple, too thin for the desert, and her eyes held a story that didn't match the cheerful words she'd written. She looked at the empty land, then at him, with no smile. He tipped his hat. "Ma'am." She just nodded, clutching a small, worn bag. This wasn't the sturdy, farm-raised woman he'd described wanting. She was slight, all sharp angles and watchful eyes. He felt a knot of disappointment in his gut. He'd ordered a partner, but this person looked like a strong wind would break her. He took her bag. "House is this way." He walked, not offering his arm. He heard her footsteps, light and quick, behind him. The silence between them was louder than the crickets. He showed her the spare room, small and clean. "Supper's at 6, he said, and left her there. Alone in the room, she didn't unpack. She went to the window, staring at the miles of empty land. Her shoulders, which had been pulled tight to her ears, slowly began to drop. For the first time in months, no one was chasing her. This barren place, this quiet man, was a hiding place. It was perfect. That evening, they ate stew in silence. He asked about her journey. She gave short, practiced answers that didn't quite fit together. He didn't push. Her hands were smooth, not a worker's hands. Another lie. He decided he'd give it a week before writing the agency. As the sky turned deep purple, she finally spoke, her voice quiet. "I know I'm not what you ordered." She met his gaze, her eyes full of a truth she wouldn't say. He held her look for a long moment, the disappointment still there. But underneath it, a flicker of curiosity. Who was this woman really? He just nodded, finishing his coffee. "We'll see." Morning came early. He was already at the corral when she stepped onto the porch, wearing one of his old work shirts. She said nothing, just watched him struggle with a new, wild-eyed mare. The horse kicked and spun, refusing the saddle. He was a patient man, but frustration was getting the better of him. Without a word, she stepped over the fence rail. He held up a hand. "Stay back. She's dangerous." But the woman moved slowly, not towards the man, but towards the horse's flicking, angry eyes. She made a low, soft sound in her throat, a hum that wasn't a song. The mare's ear twitched towards her. The woman stood still, just humming, her own fearful energy gone, replaced by a strange calm. After a full minute, the horse blew out a hard breath, its tense muscles easing. The woman slowly reached out, touching its neck. The mare didn't flinch. He watched, stunned. She took the bridle from his loose grip and slipped it on the horse as easy as putting on a coat. She handed the reins to him, her fingers brushing his. A spark, not romantic, but human. "She's not mean," the woman said softly. "She's scared. I understand scared." That was the most she'd ever said. He saw a crack in her wall. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. The shutters came down over her eyes again. "Around," she said, and walked back to the house. He looked from the now calm mare to the slight figure retreating. His disappointment began to soften into confusion. Who was he hiding on his ranch? He found her later, attempting to chop wood. Her swings were weak, the axe bouncing off the log. He moved beside her, his large hands covering hers on the axe handle. "You'll hurt yourself. Like this." He guided her arms through the swing. She was rigid at his touch, not used to kindness. The axe bit deep into the wood. She finally looked up at him, really looked. She saw the weariness in his face, the loneliness that matched her own. He saw the deep, old bruise fading near her hairline, carefully hidden. They both stepped back, an unspoken truth now hanging between them. She wasn't the only one with scars. A week passed. They fell into a routine, speaking only of chores. But he noticed things. She jumped at loud noises. She always sat facing the door. One night, a thunderstorm rolled across the plains. He got up to check the animals and found her in the kitchen, gripping the counter, shaking, staring into the blackness outside. "It's just thunder," he said, his voice low. She shook her head, a tear escaping. "It sounds like other things." He didn't ask what. Instead, he pulled out 2 chairs. "Sit. We'll wait it out together." They sat in the dark kitchen, lit only by lightning flashes. With each boom, she flinched. He started talking just to fill the space. He talked about buying the land, his dream of building something that lasted. He talked about the quiet that sometimes felt like an enemy. He'd never said these things aloud. She listened, her breathing slowly matching the rhythm of his words, calming. When the storm passed, she whispered, "Thank you." Then she said, "My name isn't the one on the papers." He was silent, waiting. "The man I was supposed to marry, he wasn't a good man. The letters you got, a friend wrote them for me. To get me away." It was the first real piece of herself she'd offered. He felt a cold anger for a man he'd never met. "Is he coming?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know. I hope not." He made a decision then. "You're safe here." It was a promise, simple and solid as the ground. She finally believed it. The next day, he brought a small, gentle mare into the corral. "Yours," he said. "If you want." Her eyes filled. It was the first gift given without expectation she'd ever received. She named the mare Second Chance. When she rode, a real, unguarded smile broke across her face. He watched from the porch, and for the first time, he felt his own loneliness crack. That night at supper, she reached across the table and touched his work-roughened hand. "You are kinder than I dreamed." He turned his hand over, letting her fingers rest in his palm. No words were needed. The contract was gone. Something real had begun. A month of fragile peace. They worked side by side. Laughter started to find its way into the house. He taught her to mend fences. She taught his old dog silly tricks. They were becoming a unit. One afternoon, a stranger rode up, a lawman with a sharp gaze and a silver star. The man's friendly tone didn't match his eyes. Looking for a woman. Brunette, about her height. Wanted for theft back east. He showed a wrinkled drawing that looked a little like her, but not exactly. The cowboy felt her go still as stone behind him. He leaned on the porch post, blocking the lawman's view of her. "Ain't seen her," he drawled, his voice easy. "Just me and my wife here." The word wife hung in the air, heavy and new. The lawman's eyes scanned the yard, lingering on her where she stood by the well. "Your wife, huh? Mind if I say howdy?" The cowboy stepped forward, his size suddenly imposing. "She's shy. And you're trespassing. The road's back that way." The 2 men locked eyes. The lawman finally tipped his hat, a sly smile on his face. "My mistake. You have a good day." They watched him ride away until he was a speck. Her whole body trembled. "That wasn't a real lawman," she breathed. "That was his brother. He found me." The danger was no longer a ghost. It had a face and had stood on their land. The cowboy didn't hesitate. He fetched his rifle from above the hearth, checking the load. "Then we'll be ready." We sealed everything. He wasn't protecting a business arrangement. He was protecting her. Her fear was now his to fight. That evening, he moved her things from the spare room into his. "It's safer," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Walls are thinner." She understood. They lay in the dark, back to back, a foot of space between them. The tension was a live wire. But it wasn't just fear. It was the fierce, burning need to keep the other safe. He spoke into the darkness. "Whatever you took, it doesn't matter to me." She swallowed a sob. "I didn't take money. I took my freedom, and my sister's letters proving what he did to her." The full truth was out. He found her hand in the dark and held it tight. The last wall was gone. The next days were filled with a nervous quiet. Every distant sound was a threat. He taught her to shoot his spare pistol. Her hands were steady, her aim true. "I'm a fast learner," she said, and he saw the steel that had always been under her fear. They prepared the house like a fortress. But in the quiet moments, their connection deepened. He confessed he'd wanted a mail-order bride because he was too afraid of rejection, of his own rough ways. She confessed she'd chosen his ad because his handwriting was clumsy and honest, unlike the slick letters from others. One night, as they shared coffee on the porch, a coyote howled. She didn't jump. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder. It was a simple, profound act of trust. He slowly put his arm around her, pulling her close. Her scent of soap and sun filled his senses. This was what he'd needed all along. Not just help, but a heartbeat beside his. The waiting was the hardest part, the not knowing. It frayed nerves. One afternoon, snapping over a misplaced tool, they both stopped, stared, and instead of arguing, they moved together. Their first kiss was not soft, but desperate, a confirmation of life in the face of fear. It was a promise, salty with tears neither would admit to shedding. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he started. She finished. "We begin." For the first time, they dared to imagine a future beyond the threat. They dared to hope. The attack didn't come with warning. It came in the dead of night. The crash of the barn door being kicked open. The panic scream of the horses. The cowboy was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice a low command. But she was already pulling on her boots, the pistol in her hand. "We face it together," she said. And he knew arguing was pointless. He moved into the yard, using the moonlight as his guide. Two shadows were trying to cut the horses loose. One was the false lawman. The other was a larger, crueler version, the man from back east. Rage, cold and clear, flooded the cowboy. This man had tried to break the best thing that ever happened to him. "Get off my land," the cowboy's voice boomed across the yard. The men spun. The cruel one smiled, a mean twist of his lips. "There's my property," he said, nodding toward the house where she stood in the doorway. "She owes me." A shot rang out, kicking up dust at the cruel man's feet. She had fired the warning shot, her figure framed in the light. "I owe you nothing," she shouted, her voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. The cruel man snarled and fired toward the house. Everything turned to chaos. The cowboy fired, driving the men behind the water trough. Shots were exchanged, pinging off metal and wood. A lantern was knocked over in the barn. Flames, hungry and quick, licked up the dry hay. The barn was on fire, with the horses trapped inside. The threat shifted instantly. The two attackers saw their chance and vanished into the night, their mission abandoned for now. The immediate danger was the fire. "The horses," she screamed, already running toward the blaze, ignoring the gunfight. He was right behind her. Heat blasted them. They fought through smoke, leading the terrified animals to safety, coats over their heads. Their world was reduced to roaring flame, choking black smoke, and the shared, urgent goal: save what they'd built. With the last horse clear, they stumbled back, collapsing on the ground, coughing, faces smudged with soot. The barn was a lost cause, a pyramid of fire against the night sky. He looked at her, at the ruin of half his livelihood. She looked at him, her eyes full of devastation. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault." He took her face in his soot-blackened hands. His eyes were fierce, reflecting the fire. "Listen to me. You are not what I ordered. But you're exactly what I needed. Barns can be rebuilt." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as their past burned away behind them. The final obstacle wasn't the men. It was her belief that she brought only ruin. He had just burned that lie to the ground. The sheriff and a few neighbors came at dawn. They found the couple, weary but united, sipping coffee in front of the barn's smoking skeleton. She told the true sheriff everything: the cruelty, the fake lawman, the theft of her own life. Warrants would be issued. The shadow was finally gone for good. The neighbors, good people, saw them holding hands and understood. Without being asked, they brought lumber and tools. The sound of hammers and saws replaced the gunshots and crackling fire. A new barn, a new beginning, would rise from the ashes, built by many hands. A week later, under a sky full of stars, he didn't ask. He simply got down on one knee in the dirt of their yard. He held out a simple ring, his mother's. "The papers we signed were for business. I want a real one. With you. For always." She fell to her knees in front of him, not as someone begging, but as an equal meeting him in the dust. Her yes was a whisper, then a laugh, then a sob of pure joy. He slipped the ring on her finger, and the contract was finally, truly, signed in their hearts. The final scene is months later. The new barn stands strong. She's on the porch, her hand resting on a now swelling belly. He rides in from the pasture, sees her, and his whole face transforms with a love so deep it hurts. He walks to her, places his rough hand gently on her stomach, then kisses her, slow and sure. The camera pulls back, showing their small, thriving ranch, a green oasis in the vast land. It's not the life either of them ordered from a catalog of dreams. It's harder, scarred, and more beautiful than they could have ever imagined. They are exactly what the other needed. And that is the only promise that ever mattered. The final shot is of their intertwined hands on the porch rail, his weathered, hers now strong and sun-touched, the simple gold band gleaming in the Arizona sun. They are home. The work on the new barn was a blessing. It gave them a shared purpose that didn't involve looking over their shoulders. He worked alongside his neighbors, accepting their help with a grateful nod. She provided gallons of strong coffee and hearty meals, her presence now a steady, accepted part of the ranch. He watched her, a constant warmth in his chest. She laughed with the wife of a neighbor, a real, unguarded sound. She was putting down roots, right here in the dust. But sometimes, he'd catch her staring east, a shadow in her eyes. The fear wasn't gone. It was just buried under the safety he provided. One afternoon, a letter came for her, the first piece of mail not from the agency. Her hands shook opening it. It was from her sister back east. The words were good. Her sister was safe, had moved away. But the letter also confirmed the cruel man was still free, still angry. The shadow had a long reach. She showed him the letter. No secrets left. He read it slowly, his jaw tight. "A tree doesn't stop growing because there's wind," he said finally, a simple piece of ranch wisdom. "We just build stronger roots." He pointed to the new barn posts set deep in the earth. Like that. That night, she initiated their kiss for the first time. It was less desperate than before, more a discovery. A slow, tender exploration of this new, terrifying peace. When they parted, she kept her forehead against his. "I want to earn this," she whispered. "This life. With you." He understood. Pride was part of her, too. The next morning, he showed her the ranch ledger. "If we're partners," he said, "you need to know the numbers. The good and the bad." It was the ultimate act of trust, handing over the truth of his fragile dream. She studied the books with fierce concentration, asking sharp questions. By the week's end, she had a plan. "We're wasting money on feed from town," she said, pointing to a column. "The west pasture has better grass. We should rotate the herd there, save the bought feed for winter." It was a smart, practical idea he'd been too stubborn to see. His partner wasn't just in heart. She was in mind. A new face rode in just after dawn. A drifter, hat pulled low, clothes worn thin. He asked for work, for a meal. The cowboy's instinct said no. But she saw the hollow look in the man's eyes, the same hunger she'd once carried. "We have extra stew," she said, before he could refuse. The man, who called himself Joe, ate silently on the porch. He had a quiet intensity. He noticed everything: the new lumber, the bullet nick in the porch post, the way she and the cowboy moved around each other, a careful dance. "You had trouble," Joe stated, not asking. The cowboy's stance became protective. "Handled." Joe just nodded, finishing his food. "I'm good with horses. I'll work for roof and board a few days." Something about the man's calm skill with the nervous mare made the cowboy reluctantly agree. But he slept with his rifle closer that night. Joe was a ghost of a worker, silent and efficient. He fixed the stubborn hinge on the stable door, a problem that had plagued them for months. He offered no story, but his eyes were often on the horizon, as if waiting. She felt a strange kinship with him. Another soul running, but from what? The tension built for 3 days. The cowboy found Joe one evening, staring at her where she brushed her mare. There was a look in his eye that wasn't threat, but deep, profound sadness. The cowboy confronted him. "You looking for something here, Joe?" Joe turned, his expression weary. "I'm looking for a man. My brother. He came through here, causing trouble for a woman. I aim to find him and stop him for good." The air left the cowboy's lungs. This wasn't an enemy. This was an avenging angel, sent from her past. She overheard from the doorway, her face pale. Joe looked at her. "Ma'am, if you're the one he wronged, I'm here to say I'm sorry. And to make it right." He was the cruel man's brother, but the good one, the one who'd tried to protect his own sister. The twist was a relief, and a new kind of dread. Joe agreed to stay on as silent sentry. His presence was a comfort and a reminder. The danger was still out there, but now they had an ally who knew the enemy intimately. She slept a little easier, but the cowboy watched Joe, wondering what price he'd ultimately have to pay to end this. The sky turned a relentless, cloudless blue. The heat became a physical weight. The creek that fed their land slowed to a trickle, then to dust. The new grass in the west pasture-browned. Their first real test as partners wasn't a man, but nature itself. Arguments sparked like heat lightning. He wanted to sell cattle now before they lost value. She wanted to hold on, to dig a well, an expensive gamble. "We can't afford to dig maybe," he snapped, the stress of his dying dream sharpening his words. She flinched, and he instantly hated himself. They worked in a tense silence for 2 days, the weight of the drought and their disagreement crushing the joy they'd built. She spent hours walking the land, studying the lay of it, remembering stories her grandfather, a well-digger, had told. She found a spot where the cottonwoods grew thickest. She came to him, not with an argument, but with a proposal. "Use the money from selling the 5 weakest calves," she said. "Not the herd. Just those. To dig. Right here." She showed him on the crude map she'd drawn. Her voice was calm, sure. She was fighting for their future, not just hers. He saw the fierce hope in her eyes. He'd promised to build with her. This was the building. He nodded, a single, decisive dip of his chin. The next day, the well-digger came. The drill bit into the parched earth, a grinding, expensive sound that felt like their last chance. For 2 days, it brought up only dry rock and sand. The money was nearly gone. The digger shook his head. "Another 10 feet, then I gotta stop." The cowboy held her hand as the drill turned again. The sound changed. A wet, sucking sound. Then, a gush of clear, beautiful water erupted into the sunlight. She didn't cheer. She sank to her knees in the mud, weeping. He knelt beside her, the cool spray on their faces. They had not just found water. They had found an unshakable faith in each other. In the desert, they had created their own oasis. With water secure, a new energy took hold. The saved herd began to recover. Joe proved invaluable, teaching her more about horses, showing a gentle patience. The cowboy watched them, a quiet understanding forming. Joe was healing his own guilt by protecting her. One evening, she found Joe looking at a small, faded photograph. It showed 2 boys, arms slung around each other. "We weren't always bad," Joe said softly. Then he got a taste for taking what wasn't his. Started with Pa's respect, ended with well. He tucked the picture away. I should have stopped him sooner. Her hatred for the cruel man shifted, just a little, into pity. A life spent taking was its own prison. She thought of the life growing inside her, of the love she was building. She had won. The realization was a profound release. She was free, even if he was still out there. She shared the news of the baby with the cowboy not under stars, but in the bright light of the new barn, surrounded by the smell of fresh-cut wood and hay. He was holding a harness. He just stood very still, his eyes growing bright. He dropped the leather and pulled her into a wordless, crushing hug. His joy was a physical thing. He talked to her belly at night, telling the child about the land, the horses, the water they found. He built a sturdy cradle from the leftover barn lumber. Each swing of his hammer was a prayer for the future. Joe saw the change, the deepening bond. He made a decision. I can't hide here forever, he told them one morning. I need to go find him. Finish this. So this child, he nodded to her, never has to look over its shoulder. It was a debt he felt he owed. They didn't try to stop him. They gave him supplies. A good horse. The cowboy shook his hand, a firm grip between men who understood duty. She hugged him, this strange, sad protector. Thank you, Joe. He rode east, toward the trouble, to ensure it never came west again. A month after Joe left, a different lawman arrived, this one with genuine urgency. There had been a shootout in a town 200 miles east. A man matching the cruel one's description was dead. Another man, matching Joe's, was wounded and in jail. The news was an earthquake. The threat was over, truly over. But the cost was Joe's freedom. The lawman said Joe would face a judge, but given the circumstances and his testimony about his brother's crimes, he'd likely be shown mercy. Still, he'd be locked away for a time. She felt a crushing guilt. Joe was paying for her peace. The cowboy held her as she cried. He chose his path, he murmured. To make things right, we have to honor that by living this life well. He meant it, but he also felt the weight. Justice was messy. They wrote to Joe in his cell. She told him of the baby's first kick. The cowboy wrote of the ranch, the water, the new calves. They sent money for a better lawyer. Their letters were a rope thrown into a dark well, hoping he could hold on. Her pregnancy progressed, bringing its own challenges. She was often tired, sick. He took on all the heavy work, refusing to let her lift a finger. She chafed at being coddled. I'm not broken, she insisted one afternoon, trying to lift a feed sack. He gently took it from her. I know, he said, his voice thick. But you're carrying the most precious thing on this ranch. Let me carry the rest. It wasn't about weakness. It was about sharing the load in a new way. She saw the love and fear in his eyes, fear of losing this miracle, and yielded. That night, she placed his hand on her rounded belly where the baby kicked strong and sure. Life was pulsing between them, a defiant beat against all the past darkness. The storm clouds of their past were finally, truly, breaking apart. The sun ahead was for their child. A well-dressed man from the railroad company came calling. He offered a lot of money for a strip of their land, a route for a new line. It was more cash than the cowboy had ever seen in one sum. It could mean security, an easier life for the child. He was tempted. He brought the offer to her. She listened, then walked to the edge of the land in question. It was the west pasture, where they'd found water, where the herd now thrived. She imagined the noise, the smoke, the strangers cutting their piece in two. No, she said, simple and final.
He was surprised.
Think of what it could give us. She turned to him. It would take from us. This quiet. This space. Our child's inheritance won't be money. It'll be this. She spread her arms to the vast, quiet land.
You taught me that.
He had. In his fear for their future, he'd forgotten. Her clarity was a gift. He refused the offer. The railroad man left in a huff, calling them foolish. They stood together, watching the empty land. They were no longer just hiding on it. They were its stewards, its defenders. Her time was close. A seasoned midwife from a neighboring ranch came to stay. The cowboy felt useless again, relegated to boiling water and pacing. Every sound from the bedroom made his heart stop. This was a danger he couldn't fight with a rifle. After hours of quiet struggle, he heard a new sound. A thin, strong, angry cry. The midwife opened the door, beaming, and ushered him in. She was exhausted, sweaty, radiant. And in her arms, a tiny, wrapped bundle with a furious, perfect face. He approached slowly, as if to a wild foal. He knelt by the bed, tears cutting clean trails through the dust on his cheeks. He looked from his son to her. Words failed him utterly. All the loneliness, the hardship, the fear, it all funneled into this single, overwhelming point of pure, terrifying love. "We did it," she whispered, her own tears falling into the baby's fine hair. He could only nod, his rough finger gently stroking the baby's impossibly small hand. The tiny fingers curled around his, a grip stronger than any contract. A new soul had signed on to their dream. They didn't argue about the name. They both knew. They named him Joseph, a solid, honest name. A name for a man who did the right thing, even when it cost him everything. They would tell their son about his namesake, about courage and redemption. The ranch came alive in a new way. The baby's cries were a new music. The cowboy would ride in from the range and go straight to the cradle, still smelling of horse and earth, to pick up his son. He'd point out the window, whispering, "That's yours. All of it." She healed, stronger than before. Motherhood didn't make her soft. It gave her a deeper, fiercer strength. She could calm her crying son with the same low hum she'd used on the scared mare. The rhythms of the land and the child became one. A letter arrived from Joe. His voice on paper was lighter. The judge had been lenient. With good behavior, he'd be out in a few years. He thanked them for the letters, said they were a window to a better world. He signed it, "Your friend, Joe." "Tell little Joe I said hello." They framed the letter. It was a closed chapter, a wound finally scarred over. The past was truly past. Their story was now entirely forward-facing, measured in feed schedules, in the baby's growth, in the slow, steady expansion of their herd. One evening, with the baby asleep, they sat on their porch. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of the day's work, the baby's sighs from inside, the steady beat of their hearts in sync. She leaned into him. "I never even wanted a husband, you know," she mused. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "I just wanted a hired hand who wouldn't quit." He kissed her hair. "Look what we got instead." They had gotten a life. A messy, hard, breathtakingly beautiful life. It was the ultimate twist, finding everything you never knew you needed. Years have a way of passing on a ranch. Little Joe is now a sturdy boy of 4, with his father's serious eyes and his mother's quick smile. He follows the cowboy like a shadow, a tiny boots echoing big ones. He has his own gentle way, with the new foals, a gift from her. The cowboy's hair is grayer at the temples. Her hands, once smooth, are now marked by sun and work, but they are strong, capable hands. They are the hands of a true partner. They've bought more land, paid for by their joint decisions, their shared sweat. One spring morning, a rider approaches. It's a man, older, moving stiffly. He stops at the boundary fence. The cowboy steps out, his hand instinctively going to his son's shoulder. The man takes off his hat. "It's Joe."